from weapons fired by the Israeli army itself. That was followed by the Goldstone report, which in very unambiguous terms said that massive and disproportionate violence was used by the Israelis, that human shields were used, and that civilians were deliberately targeted. This is from someone, a very distinguished jurist from South Africa, who happens to be Jewish. That was followed by the, can we call it, international piracy, the attack on the Mavi Marmara, the Turkish ship. By the way, this group of boats was called a flotilla. You mustn't use this word. This is another word of term of propaganda. Flotilla is a naval word. It's a military word, like an armada. This was a collection. What was this so-called flotilla? It was a collection of yachts that you would see in the basin at Manzanita. You know, it was a collection of small boats. We're not talking about destroyers and, you know, aircraft carriers and cruisers and minesweepers. This was a collection of private boats hired by humanitarian organizations in Turkey to deliver humanitarian aid to the besieged people of Gaza, who have been under illegal blockade for more than 3 years now. A blockade which the United States supports and endorses. And so this attack, in which 9 civilians were killed, was, to me, the word brazen should be used in describing it. And the UN Human Rights Commission also condemned the Israeli action. And the Israeli Foreign Ministry, in almost a kind of automatic reflex, says, well, the UN is, you know, it's full of Jew haters and anti-Israel elements. It is not balanced, it is not biased, yada, yada, yada. It's a way of silencing debate. It's another way of telling you, shut up. I don't want to hear from you. With polite language. So, and then Said said about the issue of Palestine. So I want to say there's been a shift in perception about Israel over the last couple of years because of the egregiousness of these particular actions. On top of the endless colonization campaign which continues, even though Obama naively announces that there's a peace process. There is no peace process. A process indicates that something proceeds. There's nothing proceeding. There is only more and more colonization, settlement building. That's what's proceeding, not a peace process. And I remember in 1993 when the Oslo Accords were signed and there was such euphoria in the land. You know, there was Clinton like a Roman emperor bringing Arafat and Rabin to the Rose Garden in the White House. You know, he's had his arms around them. It was pure Roman imperialism. You know, you could capture that moment. And Edward Said called me up immediately and said, this is a disaster. This is a catastrophe. This is the Palestinian Versailles, a capitulation. Arafat has given up everything, and he's gotten nothing. We now have the right to collect our own garbage. He almost yelled into the telephone. That's what he negotiated for, the right to collect our own garbage. We're going to have a state of Bantustans that are not connected. This is 1993, September. So I went to New York. He called me, come to New York. We've got to do an interview. We did an interview. We got it out there. But it didn't have any impact because it doesn't resonate. There's no traction in the corporate media, which is so linked to imperial policies, linked to those fantasies and myths and stories that are woven by the spinmeisters in Washington. Even today, the actual Oslo Accord and subsequent accords, its details are unknown to the American people. How many of you know that the remaining part of the West Bank is divided into 3 areas? One controlled by the Palestinians, one jointly controlled by the Palestinians and the Israelis, and the third area is completely controlled by the Israelis. There's a map over here, which you're you're free to pick up. It's a green map of Palestine. It shows what has happened to the land of Palestine. In fact, this map understates it. It's much worse than it is as it's shown there. So Saeed asks, how many friends avoid the subject, even today? How many colleagues want none of Palestine's controversy? How many bien-pensant liberals, like highfalutin intellectuals? How many bien-pensant liberals have time for Bosnia and Chechnya and Rwanda and Somalia and Nicaragua and El Salvador and Vietnam and human rights and civil rights everywhere on earth, but not for Palestine and Palestinians? Why is it that this particular issue has so little support inside the United States? And why is it that the US government is so heavily biased in one direction? Here's another term of propaganda: honest broker. Are you kidding? The United States? I mean, let's be real here. Let's speak truth to the people. You can handle it, unlike what Jack Nicholson said in that movie, A Few Good Men. Right? You can handle the truth. The United States supports Israel 100%, diplomatically, economically, militarily. That's a fact. We don't have to hide that. But when it goes to the rest of the world and says, we're an honest broker, we want peace, just peace between the two parties. How can there ever be any kind of justice when the reigning superpower is in the corner of one of the two parties, and the other party is so vulnerable and so weak? This imbalance cannot produce peace. It can only produce endless conflict, which is why I'm afraid I'm going to be giving parts of this lecture 10 and 20 years from now. There will be the question of Palestine. There will be the question of, this conflict in the Middle East. How are we doing on time? David? Doing okay? I notice very few people have walked out. Hint, hint. To get back to the imperial war machine, because when I traveled to Syria and these other countries that I mentioned to you, people there ask me, America wants war. What? Why? Why do you think that? Because it's good for their business. They can use war to expand their bases in our countries. They can use war to seize our resources. Do you know that our country or their country, I never know what pronoun to use, because sometimes I don't feel I'm connected at all. I mean, they're doing what they want, and I'm off like on this island somewhere, waving. But I'll use they, 735 military bases and installations around the world. Why are they there? For freedom, for democracy, to defend us? Or do they have some other motive? Is there something else going on? The imperial war machine. Maybe some of you have heard of Major General Smedley Butler. A couple of people nodded their heads. I mean, he should be a household name. Two-time Medal of Honor winner, one of the most decorated figures in American military history. Well, he figured things out, to his credit. And after he resigned his commission from the Marine Corps, he wrote a book, War is a Racket. This book should be required reading in every single political science class at Lane Community College and at the University of Oregon, and every American history class as well. Here's what General Smedley Butler said. I helped make Mexico safe for American oil. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests. In China, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. I was rewarded with honors, medals, and promotions. Looking back on it, I feel I could have given Al Capone a few hints. You know Al Capone, the big mafia leader in Chicago? Right.
This is true.
The best he could do, Smedley Butler said, was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. And today, if you put in, you know, the new corporations that rule the earth and that the American military helps to defend, you see the patterns continuing. Howard Zinn, wonderful, wonderful man, someone I miss very, very much. But before I talk about that, I spent a little bit of time with Robert Fisk in California a couple of weeks ago. And he brought to my attention a wonderful article in the Los Angeles Times in which it seems that there is a predilection or a tendency to quote government sources, unnamed. So I'm calling this Official Sources Say. This is from the Los Angeles Times. You know,